What's up? How's it going over there?
Oh, dude, I was just disclosing, which I don't normally do, that I'm actually working from the office, which you know.
Well, you could have just done one of those painted backgrounds. I think there's an option in there if you want to just for those who haven't showed up yet.
I just got a message. I don't know if this is fake news or what, but I just learned that apparently you can't, with the latest Zoom update, you can't use the Snap camera anymore. And that made me really sad because that's become like my top proficiency in life.
What was the reasoning behind that?
Security, unclear. I heard it through the grapevine, so I didn't get a lot of details.
Sounds to me like people just don't want others flourishing anymore, especially at Snap and Zoom. But I didn't say it live. So, big shout out to everyone that's already logged in. I know we had 300 plus RSVPs for this event, and you all are the focus. We're talking about software engineering job search in the times of a pandemic. And we're really lucky to have Troy here sharing insights because Troy has a college history in the tech industry as an entrepreneur. And I'm going to let him introduce himself after do a quick introduction of who I am, because many of you are probably listening like, who's this guy speaking? But I say that because Troy is the CEO of Resource.io, which is a tool that's building out modern day recruiting. And what a time for that tool, given the fact that everything is moving to a more globalized economy, more digital first economy, and having built out the company that's infrastructure is all digital. It'd be great to learn from you what you're seeing in the industry in regards to hiring and job search, job seeking. But really quickly, so we're all here today for Software Sessions. It's a podcast put together by one of our teammates at Outco.io, Richie Nunez. Outco is a job search training program, a 4-week program that focuses on computer science fundamentals and emotional intelligence skills development. All that means is we try our best to help you understand recruiters and help you understand the technical interview problems that are going to be presented to you during the job search and help you get a job with a goal of 3 months or less. And should that goal not be met, we offer one-to-one coaching until you secure an offer. We've worked with 1,700 engineers, 1,300 of those already have jobs all over the tech industry, FAANG companies, mid-sized companies, startup companies. And we have coaches from all over the industry, technical recruiters, other software engineers that are supporting those engineers. And if you want to learn more, I'll plug this in at the end as well. Outco.io/info-session-sign-up. Dan, if you can put that in the comments, that'd be great, because I know I'm going to forget to do so. And my name is Joshua Encarnacion. You typically roll the R's really, really obnoxiously. So it's like Encarnacion, but we don't have to do that. And I'm serving here as the CEO of Outco. We have a couple teammates on the Zoom here. Marissa, you want to wave at everyone? You all know Dan. He's bald. I'm bald. Our COO is bald. It's not a cult, it's a trend. And it's our way to cope with quarantine. But enough about me. Troy, can you give us a quick introduction before we start sharing tips, tricks, insights, advice on how to adjust to the job search as a software engineer in times of a pandemic? Quick intro, please.
Yeah, I will, as long as I don't also have to shave my head. Is that cool?
That was the call to action at the end of this.
Okay, cool. I'm going to pretend I'm not going to convert. How about that? Okay, cool. My name is Troy, as mentioned. I'm the CEO of a small startup in San Francisco called Resource. Our URL is resource.io, and we build tools that help recruiters actually reach candidates in a more personalized way. And increasingly, we're building more software that helps them deliver a much more personalized and transparent experience once they do. And so a lot of our kind of where we sit as a company is in what we call kind of the candidate experience space, and increasingly so, where our goal and mission is really to equal the power balance in the hiring dynamic across companies and candidates. And we've long felt like it was too in favor and too skewed in favor of the company. And the way that I like to think about that is companies tend to be privy to way more information about you, say, in the interview process than you're able to get about them. And we want to try to change that in a way and make it a 50-50 street. And so we're building a suite of tools over time to help with that. Along this journey, I've been a candidate many times. I've had many pains. I also have worked for now close to a decade in the world of recruiting. So I've been on the kind of inside and gotten some sense of why a lot of us have had poor experiences as candidates, and what leads to that. And, you know, I've had my fair share of angst against kind of companies and recruiters giving me a bad experience until I realized kind of the incentives and a lot of the dynamics for their workflow and challenges that they have. So I've been able to empathize a little bit, but I still probably sit on the candidates side of the candidates team ultimately. And I've run recruiting. Oh, go ahead.
That's how we met, right? That's how our relationship kicked off. I mean, we were doing recruiting for software engineers at Google. Walk us through your journey up to that point, because you did something really interesting for the folks that don't know you before Google, correct? Which was...
Yeah, so I actually ran recruiting for a company called Groupshark, which was a music streaming service that was popular in the US and abroad before Spotify. And what's interesting about that was that I ended up in that role at I was something like 22. And I was the director of the function. I had no idea what I was doing. I spent multiple years messing everything up. But the way that I got there was kind of by actually making what seemed like a really, I think, unwise career decision out of college, more or less, which was taking a really, really low salary and a no status role with a title that was unknown and other things, just to get inside of a company that I was really passionate about and was growing. And a couple months into that journey, I got essentially lucky, and I got situated in a role that was way over my head, and I just said yes, and I figured it out as I went. And I think many of my friends ended up taking much more money out of school for jobs that provide a lot less learning. So that'll be a theme of a lot of my shtick.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like advice immediately for those job seekers, software engineers on the call that are more on the junior side. Take the risks, right? That leap of faith in a job that's maybe not as notable or isn't going to pay as high can then lead into a job at Google, then becoming the CEO of your own company. So that's where we are today, right? Resource.io, a tool to further facilitate modern recruiting, a digital platform. And so, I mean, my first question for you before we take the conversation any further is, how has Resource.io had to adjust in terms of hiring, also just like connecting with your team, which is literally software engineers, because it's a software platform, in the times today? I mean, we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about a pandemic, right?
Yeah, I wish I had some sort of wise tropes to share here. I think we're struggling like everybody, and we're trying to figure it out. Our team has been, I think, really adaptable in the way we work digitally historically. Like, I think that I've learned and come to value how useful it is to have folks that can just switch context and go from, for example, working in office every day to being highly productive, not. And I think this is actually like my hypothesis, if I can smuggle in a second opinion here. I think that the more you can be forward and practiced in fully asynchronous communication and fully kind of a remote working orientation, the more confident you are in that, the more practiced you are in that, the more experience you are in that, I think it's going to strengthen your job search relative to others. And so I see it's very hard to imagine a future where we're going to kind of be working on average less remotely or virtually than we were before this pandemic. I'm fairly confident it'll be hard to go back to the baseline we had before. And so this is maybe a primer for how to differentiate yourself in the interview process. Very few candidates are going to be like, I'm really incredible at self-organizing and self-disciplining my days and working, with a team fully asynchronously. That might be something that you find yourself getting strong at just by way of having built the muscles during the job search process. It's very likely. So just a theme that we can poke back up later.
So you're getting to the heart of the conversation, which is, I'm a job seeker, I'm a software engineer. How should I feel right now in terms of the prospects of me earning a job in the next week, month, couple months? Right, you mentioned it's going to be hard for us to pivot back to a world where we're all sitting in a physical infrastructure, like an actual institution, right? Like, now it's all digital. What does that mean for me as a job seeker? I want to know. Like, should I be anxious to the point where analysis paralysis, or how do I keep going?
Yeah. I think this brings up a broader theme for me, which is just the psychology of the job seeker. And I actually think this is one of the hardest parts of the entire job process to manage. I think that in a lot of ways, when we're looking and interviewing for jobs, often because the power dynamic is such the way it is, we end up feeling less empowered and more anxious and more on edge. We have less information. We don't have the power in the relationship. We're showing ourselves vulnerably and getting judged effectively day after day. I think that it's possible that a negative mindset in this situation, it's easier said than done, actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So in other words, the more anxious you are, the less likely it could be that you get the job. And so doing a lot of work up front to like situate yourself in a stable headspace is really important, particularly now. So I'll just kind of call out the elephant in the room, which is like the job market is worse now than it was for candidates 2 months ago. There are less companies hiring. I think that as folks for the most part, as I understand the audience here, I think a lot of folks here have skill sets that can be utilized digitally. And that's not the case for most working class Americans. And so I would say that most working class Americans have much less opportunity and privilege at the moment, in that it's required that they go to, say, their restaurant to do their job, or their job site, or whatever it is. And there are zero jobs. And I'd say in tech and as software engineers or folks working around those bounds, there are many companies still hiring. In fact, we see a lot of companies that are doubling down on the amount they're hiring at a time like this, because they know there is more talent on the market and less competition for it. So I didn't get at your question specifically, but I can talk at some of the specifics if helpful.
And you're seeing that because you're supporting companies that are hiring directly, correct? So, I mean, what I'm hearing is obviously we should be practicing active gratitude for the sake that our skill sets do transfer into a digital world, a digital economy. And also, as a software engineer, my value rises in this economy, correct? Because I'm having to solve problems digitally. But to your point on companies doubling down on hiring, how is that possible, right? Right now, with unemployment rate rising, what is it that's triggering that? Like, how should I find confidence in that and not just think, oh, Troy is just making this up?
Yeah. I think that if you can kind of think of the companies that are doing this, maybe I've never thought about this before, so this might be a terrible analogy. Like Warren Buffett likes to invest when the market's down, essentially, when nobody else wants the asset. And I think similarly, there are companies that are not capital constrained at the moment, that are in a strong position, or whose businesses are still growing, and are using this as an opportunity to capitalize on a really unique situation where they can acquire more talent at a faster pace than they would have otherwise when there was a lot more competition.
Any examples of those companies?
Yeah, so the easiest ones are all of the companies that are supporting our remote work world. So you've probably not been able to open your Twitter feed in the last month without hearing, too much about Zoom and Slack and Notion. These are companies that are supporting a lot of this asynchronous activity that's happening, or it's upticking dramatically. And so these are companies that are growing right now. There's a couple really useful tools that I've seen floating around that's showing which companies are hiring and which aren't. And we can perhaps share links to those at the end of this. The one that's coming to mind is levels.fyi, is keeping a live list of companies that are on a hiring freeze and those that aren't. So there's a lot of really creative resources that the community is putting together to help job seekers understand at a glance who's actually hiring and who isn't.
Right. And so when engaging with those companies, what is it that we're looking to highlight in the interview to set us apart from everyone else that's tackling Zoom, that's tackling Snapchat, that's now looking to interview and apply for companies that are responsible for the way that we communicate, and also building the infrastructure for all the apps on our phones, right? Like, how do I separate myself as a software engineer in the market right now?
Yeah, this is the fun part, in my opinion, and this is where I think there are a lot of small things that make a big difference. And I'll just kind of start at the last piece. I actually think it's in and of itself a differentiator for you to kind of get your mind right before the job search. One thing, and a mistake in my opinion, that I see a lot of people make is they don't actually budget time for the job search. And I don't say this from like a monetary standpoint, though that's of course relevant. Like the amount of runway that you have until you find your next job is relevant and matters. But if you can, it's really about your psychology. If, for example, you can upfront budget, say 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is for a job search, and you say, I'm gonna give myself 8 full weeks to achieve this goal, to get a great job. Then once you choose that timeline, you can work backwards from the end goal and just dial your anxiety down to 0. You have an interview at week 2, you know you've got 6 weeks left. You're not counting the days. Like give yourself a budget and then set it and forget it, and worry about it again at week 7 if you need to. I'm like let yourself not worry about it till later. It will help you show up better. Another thing is, I'll just say here, remember the goal. The goal is to get a good job that you keep for, say, a couple years. The worst case scenario is not that you don't get a job in the first 4 weeks of your search or 6 weeks of your search. The worst case scenario is actually that you get the wrong job and that you end up job searching again in 3 months. In many cases, that's true. We often have a lot of constraints sometimes that will force us to have to take a suboptimal option in the short term to solve financial goals and other things. So that's totally fair. Though I would just keep in mind, building optionality when you can. And then in terms of differentiating, one thing that I'm thinking about a lot right now is a lot of companies are getting very transparent with the types of tools they use. So there are websites like yourstack.com, I think, and stackshare.io. If you look up employees of the companies that you're targeting on Twitter, for example, they're oftentimes talking about the tools they love. Some of these are coming up: Zoom, Loom, Notion, Airtable. One really neat idea that works really well and gets our attention when candidates apply is they figure out what tools we love, and then they communicate to us or reach out or apply or whatever it is using those tools. So it says that you're savvy and that you're already familiar with some of the tools that really, really love. It kind of puts you in this camp of sort of emotional bonding. You are of the Airtable camp versus the Google Spreadsheets camp. I think this is one small thing that won't make or break anything, but if you do 5 of these things in your interview process, you will differentiate. Another one particularly challenging right now is we're interviewing remotely. Everybody's interviewing remotely, and it's really hard to build rapport and get to know people and help them get to know you when you're showing up, the Zoom gets turned on, and you start getting grilled with questions.
Does that, you don't get it. I mean, if I'm a software engineer, ultimately my tech skills should be what proves whether or not I get a job, correct? This interpersonal piece is probably even easier now to navigate because it doesn't matter. I'm on Zoom.
It shouldn't matter.
But it does.
I think that we live in a world where the people interviewing you are as flawed as a human as anybody else, and so they succumb to bias and likability and communication and their mood and probably what they ate for lunch 2 hours before. And it's any opportunity that you can connect, I think, can't hurt. And so there's some really simple, small things that you can do. For example, when you get on a Zoom call, your interviewer is almost guaranteed going to say, "Hey, I'm Sarah. I'm running your interview today. How are you?" 99% of people are going to say, "I'm good. How are you?" This is one of what I'll call a 5% risk. And I think you should be trying to take 5% risks throughout the interview process. Instead of saying, "I'm good, how are you?" say, "You know what? This has been an absolute crap month. And I'm sad about the world melting right now. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. But generally speaking, the world is in a really weird place and I'm confused. How are you?" And
so you're keeping it human, but is there a line? There's too human, right? There's too real.
Sure. I'm not going to tell you that, my dog just pooped on my floor, probably. But, there is, and this is why I call it a 5% risk. I think there is an opportunity for you to connect with people it's a risk. You're taking a risk. You're putting yourself out there a little bit. It's not a 20% risk. I think if you take 5% risk, they make you a little uncomfortable. The reason I say that is because we tend to come into interviews already heightened, like a little anxious, a little nervous. And so our baseline for authenticity, for being who we actually are, is already kind of shrunk. So a 5% risk often will just put us back to even. And that's what we want to be. We want to be even. We want to be ourselves.
Right. Just saying I'm having a tough time. I mean, acknowledging the fact that we're in a pandemic, right?
Or like, I'm doing amazing, you know, and I'm feel guilty because everybody else is sad. I don't know why. I wake up really happy this morning. Like, it doesn't need to be a bad thing that you're sharing. It could be just real for you, whatever that is. And that's just an opportunity to connect. And you'll often find that vulnerability or transparency begets transparency. So if you answered that question like that, and then you ask the interviewer how they are, they're very unlikely to say, I'm good, let's move on. Because that's just rude.
I typically just go into, hey, open the text editor. Can you write some code? Not at all. I'm not technical at all. But I wanted to ask you a couple questions coming directly from the folks right on the Zoom, the people that we're privileged to have on here. And I'm sure you can see them in the chat. We have Brian asking regarding negotiation. So even though companies are hiring and they're doubling down on hiring, are they going to use the times and take advantage of us by offering a lower salary, knowing that we have less options? Or are they going to pressure us with the deadline to accept an offer, knowing that the unemployment rate is jumping up?
It's a good question that I think it's probably entirely company dependent. But the antidote to something like this, I'd always say, is optionality. So you want to, you know, I'll use like business school speak here. You want to have a BATNA. You want to have a best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which means, in other words, you want a plan B. And the more, even if you don't have a second offer, articulating in a tactful way to the company that you're at negotiation stage with, that X, Y, and Z is very important to you, and you're pretty late with another company, and why you don't have an offer yet, you want to make sure you're making the best choice, because what you don't want is to end up taking something that's insufficient for your life goals, and 3 months from now being in a position of struggle. And so a company, ultimately, they might try to like nickel and dime you upon negotiating. I think there's a side point here about like what that tells you about the culture you're joining. It may or may not be representative, but it could be. It's interesting.
Happening more now with the current times, or is it still very much so? If a company's integrous, they're going to present an offer the way that they would regardless of the pandemic, or has that changed now that cost savings is a matter?
I have not seen any examples of a company specifically like over leveraging their position in a negotiation because of that. More common, I think this is an even more sad answer, actually. I see companies trying to do this anyway before all this went down, just like taking advantage of, you know, candidates' vulnerability. And I think the most vulnerable position you can be in is when you absolutely need this job. And sometimes that's just that's where life puts us. And that is the reality. To any extent you can have an alternative plan that you can position, like I'm doing a little bit of contract work, or I'm considering doing a little bit of contract work, or I'm early in process of these two companies, but they're moving along really fast. Any other positioning of other options will put you in a better negotiating position.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's something that we speak to as well here at Outco, right? Negotiating is tricky for everyone that's in the job seeker position, because the recruiter or the hiring manager is negotiating 4 or 5 times a week. So they're getting a lot of practice. I'm glad that you pointed to BATNA. Yeah. So my next question for you, coming directly from the chat, is 8 weeks an average timeline to hire something that we should be expecting? Does that change now, given the fact that we are in a pandemic?
Average time is higher. So there's kind of the average time it takes a company to get from first interview to offer. And then there might be like the average time it might take me as a job seeker to get a job.
Yep. And then how does that impact, given the times?
I would say that 8 weeks time to hire for a company, meaning for any one company that you start interviewing with, 8 weeks is probably a long time. Like Google's notorious for having a really long interview process, and it was between 6 and 8 weeks on average. Most companies will be able to move within a 4-week timeline based on what we see. The other way around is like, how much time should I budget for a job search? I think in a time like this, I would budget 8 weeks. This is just a rule of thumb. And it depends on how much time you can dedicate. So many of us are job searching while doing other things to make ends meet, which case we're not doing it full time. And that might be give or take a week or two, depending on the timing. But I would say you might meet a company that is actually going to be the one you get an offer from at week 5, and they might have a 4-week timeline. And so what you want to do is try to stack as many companies as close to each other at the same part of the process as early as possible, and maybe use waves. There's a couple approaches to this, but one is, go ahead.
Do we share those companies, or is that something we keep private to ourselves?
Share who you're interviewing with the other companies.
Yeah.
I different philosophies, different, there's no right way here. I personally find the most effective tactic to let companies know where you are in process generally across all companies you're interviewing at the beginning, and what your timeline is. You could say, look, this was the first phone screen. Often recruiters will ask you, where are you at in your process? I would say I'm early in my process, but depending on what's happening, I'm interviewing with a lot of companies, and a handful of them seem to be moving quickly.
Okay.
It's vague, but it lets them know that you have options.
Right? You're like letting the company know, like, hot ticket, I'm an odd option. That doesn't come off as arrogant in any way?
I think it could. It depends on how you say it, though I would say that it can be really helpful for a recruiter to know. We often really appreciate candidates telling us that they're like at a final interview at another company. And if it's our first interview, that tells us that we can change our strategy if we choose. Like, we might, in a lot of cases, speed up our process for that candidate because we had a great conversation, and we know that if we don't speed it up, it's going to be worse for them. Like, they're going to end up in a situation where they like us, but this other company has an offer in hand, so that they're going to take the bird in the hand. So you can actually view it as very helpful for the company for you to articulate where you are, and you don't have to like be specific. I can't think of a scenario where I would tell another company who I was negotiating with specifically, like which other company I was considering. I know at Google, Josh, you may have seen this, like there was a huge repository of objection handling that Google would give their recruiters about how to negotiate against specific other companies. So there was like an entire document that would tell recruiters, here's exactly how to negotiate against with a candidate who's also has an offer from Airbnb and who also has an offer from Google.
I know, and that was big reason why I made a mention to say, like, we're trained to negotiate, whereas job seekers are just going in there blind. But I'm glad that you're shedding some light on that. I guess bringing it back to the fact that given the times and the topic of conversation, are there any specific types of projects job seekers can engage in? And this is a question coming from Jacqueline. Thank you for putting that into the chat. I'm trying to get through these as quickly as possible. Or open source projects that would be more appealing to employers now or in the near future, right? Again, around this point of making us more attractive and being able to separate from other job seeking software engineers. What projects should we engage in right now that'll give us more of an edge when we're interviewing?
I generally look at this question as like the more the better, and the more relevant the better. So for example, if you're working on like an open source project period, that might just be interesting, all things, like no matter what, to any company more than none. But it would be even more interesting if you were working on an open source project that like we contributed to, or we use, or is built on technology that we use, for example. So the closer you can get, the better. And I would work backwards from your hit list, though I would also say you don't have to think of differentiating in terms of one big project or like a month-long thing or a portfolio. There are lots of little ways that I think are really cheap and very few people do that can give you an advantage. For example, if you're applying to a company or you're getting in through an existing employee, and we can talk about kind of that process too, you can record a 60-minute video using Loom in your browser that's like funny or just introduces yourself, and include that in your email. Or write 5 sentences in the email about what your strengths are as a personality and what your working preferences are. So you tend to work really well async as an individual contributor. You really love people. You get a lot of energy when you're around them. Just share more about what is true to you, because most people aren't. And so I think the fear is that you share more. You share something that tells the company that you're not a fit. And I would say that if my last point, Josh, and then you could poke. I would say, remember the goal. The goal is to find a great job. And a great job is a place that you enjoy being yourself at. And so if you share something that is true and a company rules you out because they believe you're not going to be a fit based on that information, they probably just did you a favor on some level, assuming you have some time and some optionality. They probably just saved you from getting a job that you would have found out too late you didn't like. But if a company really resonates with something that you share, it's probably an amazing sign that you're going to do well later in that interview process or culturally with that team.
And that's a great point, and it throws me off obviously to this conversation around bias. But I hear you, and it's something that we repeat often at Outco as well, which is your recruiter's looking to gather data points, right? And I know that's what Resource.io helps recruiters with, gathering more of those data points so they can make a sound decision. So I'm glad that you're tackling the fact that we shouldn't be afraid to share more. It's actually going to support our recruiter as a partner in getting us through the process. But I do have a specific question coming from VJ here in the chat, which I think is very relevant to a lot of folks in the Zoom. Right? What about if we were just recently laid off? Should we be, due to COVID-19, right? Should we be sharing that in the interview process? Like, I'm actively looking for a job because of the fact that I was recently laid off, because of the times that we're in. Is this something that I want to shy away from? Is this something I want to be more public with? How do I tell the recruiter that, like, answering this question on the reason for the change, right? Given the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Right now, I would say is one of the best times in the world to be telling a new company that you got laid off. I think that there's an amazing amount of cloud cover right now. It's a immediate, like, get out of skeptical land card. Like, you can share this up front. I would say I'm gonna give an overly strong, like, broad swath rule here. If you got laid off because of the coronavirus, you should feel no shame whatsoever. Recognize that this was a situation completely out of your control and probably out of the control of the company that laid you off to some degree. And you should totally own that fact moving forward. It will make you feel more confident. It'll make you seem more confident to the company. It'll probably give them more confidence if you are transparent upfront about that there's nothing that you're hiding. I'm a big fan of transparency generally. I think this one in particular is an easy answer, which is you should feel completely comfortable with that. And I'm reading the question here from VJ. You're serving your 2-month notice period. Is it okay to tell the recruiter that you're interviewing perhaps with the reason? Yes, I think so. And I think that it's totally fair to tell them that you're serving out a notice period as well. And therefore your timeline is X.
Right. So I'm glad that we've been tackling the list here in the chat box. I do have one that I don't want to escape from. And I asked you this before and you gave some great advice. So we're interviewing remotely and you touched on the fact that we should be connecting with folks directly, regardless of how we interview, right? People matter. And when people are making decisions, bias is going to creep in. So you could be the best engineer in the world, but if I don't like you, I'm just going to write culture fit in the feedback form, correct? And that'll be a big reason why you get rejected. Unfortunate, but true. So then what advice do you have for me if I'm a job seeking software engineer and I'm interviewing remotely? How do I put my best foot forward? What do I need to pay attention to?
Yeah, the micro opportunities are what I'll keep pointing to. It's the way you open and close the meeting. At the end, you might share one takeaway that you had from the conversation, one learning. It's finding a way to, like, in a way, what I want to say is gathering information from the other person versus just letting them extract it from you actually helps you and them. So, for example, in our interview process, in the case with anybody, our interview process selects or weights the quality of questions that were asked during the process. The reason is, if you're having to make a lot of decisions on the job about, how to design this part of the software or that one, and you're doing it without a lot of diligence, like you're not kind of understanding the context first before you make it, that's probably going to lead to worse decisions. And so our belief is that you're about to make, like, a life decision as a candidate right now. You're about to pick how you're going to spend most of your waking hours. And so not gathering a requisite amount of information that's commensurate with that degree of decision is probably a bad sign. So this actually solves for a lot of things. If you can find ways to sneak in questions in the gaps, even with like a stringent interviewer that's not leaving you a lot of space, you can even suggest at the end of an interview, I have a lot of questions I'd love to learn about your experience at the company, or what it's like to work there, or how this team operates, or how success is measured. Is there going to be space for me to do that before the end of the process? Even just that question as a catch-all makes clear that you're a diligent person. So there's that. And then there's follow-ups. If you know who you have as an interviewer up front, or you don't, but you know your curiosities, you might share those as 3 core questions to the recruiter beforehand that they can inform your interviewer with. That shows that you're proactive and diligent. You can do the same thing after the fact. You can share with the recruiter as a messenger the 3 biggest questions you came away from the interviewer with. And if that interviewer has time to answer them, you would super appreciate it. Maybe 50 or 75% of the time, they would never answer it, unclear. But it's never a bad idea to make that request.
So follow-up questions, right? You use a lot of colorful language there. I need you to tone it down for me a little bit. I don't even know what stringent means. But that's a me problem. I'm sure everyone else here is following along. I know you have three takeaways, concrete takeaways for us regarding how to better perform in a virtual interview, remote interview. And those pieces that you mentioned, I can actually pull them up for you as a reminder, because I actually found them to be very valuable. Do you remember those?
I could try.
Start off with setting up your technical environment, right?
Yeah, do extra prep. I think that if you end up, look, this is a hard problem. A lot of us have whatever Wi-Fi we have at home, and so we have to deal with stuff. I'll just say that when you're having a conversation with somebody and you're getting cut out once every few minutes, regardless of which side you're on, you're just going to leave feeling less good about that conversation. So to the degree you're talking to another human, try to do whatever you can to make this just work better. So they're focused on the actual content and not the wrapper around that, or the experience. So set up a little early, get on 10 minutes early, check your microphone, charge your AirPods, charge your computer, get a quiet room, you put the kids in the other room, put the dog in the other room, do whatever you can to just lessen the odds that something, funky is going to throw you off, just to get your head on the right things. That's like an easy one. Another part of this prep is if you can get information from your recruiters about who's going to be interviewing, often they'll provide that, particularly if you ask and they know. Look them up ahead of time. It'll give you more confidence and context on who you're talking to. Coming in, and it gives you an opportunity, if you come to a near topic, to reference something that you knew about them. That's always a good thing. So you don't need to spend an hour on it, and don't need to worry about it, but the more informed you are, the more confident you'll be, and that will come through. And then maybe, Josh, another thing that I had talked about was these small 5% risks and ways to connect when you can. And then the last thing that I've been thinking about a fair amount is, as a candidate, it is pretty helpful. I imagine job searching before I ever worked on the side of recruiting, and getting in the mind of the recruiter, I think transformed everything about how I would approach my job. And so getting in the mind of a recruiter and a company, and their goals and their incentives and their struggles and their deficiencies is really helpful. And one really interesting idea, if you're really industrious, I think, is to go buy a book on recruiting. And you probably won't get a lot of immediately useful information out of it. But I think that when you come out of it, you'll kind of realize a couple things, including that the people that are interviewing you kind of have no idea what they're doing. And they're figuring it out as they go.
By that, they have no clue. I mean, aren't they the gatekeepers? Aren't they the ones making the decision on whether or not we get paid 100K plus or not?
They have power, but they don't often have skills. They don't often have. Interviewing is not something you can go to college for. It's often often something you're undertrained for on the job. So a lot of interviewers are coming into interviews not flying by the seat of their pants and not feeling very confident about their own skills to assess talent and so on. So I think, again, these are the realizations to realize that it certainly feels like the power is in their hands, and often is, but maybe less so than you think. I think that it helps you connect with their psychology and their incentives. Like, recruiters are often viewed as people. I get questions all the time, like, is it okay to tell my recruiter that, I can't start for another month? And it's like, the recruiter is incentivized in a way that makes them almost more on your team often than they are the company's team, especially if they're an in-house recruiter. Like, they have a number of hires they need to make in a quarter, and their goals are to help you do whatever they can to get hired, because that helps them. And if they can get you past the rest of the interviewers and get to an offer, they're celebrating. They're like ringing a bell at the office. And so they're on your team. And so you can feel pretty comfortable asking questions. Recruiters specifically are often looking for ways they should scope you into the process versus out. Hiring managers are looking for any reason to scope you out. So later you get in the interview process, the more the recruiter will become your friend, and you can like use them as a coach, as a confidant. They'll often start sneaking you phone calls and say, like, here's the personality of this, like, you got to get past this engineering hiring manager. He loves, or she loves, to not talk, no small talk, just get straight to the point, use data to make your case. They'll give you tips like this. So realize upfront, be open to that, and take 5% risk with your recruiter first. They'll often lean in.
It's still about building that relationship with the recruiter, right? Having them become your advocate, your best friend in the process, which I feel I've learned is very unnatural for us as software engineers to do so. So why pay for therapy when you can work with a recruiter? I ask myself,
I'm not sure I'd go that far. The recruiter may frustrate you in the end of the day more than they help, but they're on your team in a lot of cases.
But I guess the question right above that is actually relevant. How do we not intimidate recruiters? Is there a way to intimidate recruiters in this process? Or is there a too aggressive approach?
I'm sure there's a too aggressive approach imaginable here. I'm not sure how many of us would truly be at risk of this. I've never thought about this question, how not to intimidate recruiters. I would say, unless you are going to do something extremely out of the ordinary, I wouldn't find that to be worth worrying too much about. I think it's unlikely. Recruiters are often feeling and wanting to be in the power position, their egos are at play. They like being in control. They won't often feel like the weak one, but if you go a level deeper or two, you get to know them or get them to be vulnerable, they'll admit that they don't really know what they're doing often. Some of them.
Let's I feel like now the group has just taken it to bashing recruiters, but let's get back to the fact that we're talking about job seeking in a pandemic. Troy, what 3 industries do I need to be paying attention to, which will then point me to companies? Obviously we're talking about tech in general, but tech is everywhere. What 3 industries in specific could point me to the companies that are hiring at the moment, so I can fixate on those to start my job search immediately?
Yeah, I would look at levels, and I've got to look up. I've got a list of a couple that have been floated by. I do a Google search or Twitter search. There's been like 3 or 4 hubs that are keeping live lists. A lot of you may have seen them. I would just encourage you all to share them with each other, and I can follow up after. I don't have anyone but levels.fyi on the top of my mind.
Okay, so we're talking about Zahir's resource. That's this here. Levels.fyi still hiring. Candor has one as well. Yep, and we want to share that. I'm going to pull that up really quickly. David Chouinard has pulled together this list for all of us to talk about who's hiring at the moment. And David is the CEO of Candor.co. Those 2 resources in specific have pointed a lot of the job-seeking software engineers we work with at Outco towards opportunities that are made available to us all. Troy, I appreciate you sharing as candidly as you have been. It is now 6:44 p.m. I want to give you all that are here in the group the opportunity to ask questions directly to Troy. I know I've been fielding the chat for some questions. I've been trying to guide the conversation towards getting us closer to understanding how to move as job seekers in times of a pandemic. I guess what we're hearing here is there's still industries that are doubling down on hiring, and you can reverse engineer just your day-to-day life to understand what industries those are. Telecommunications, any digital platform, any sort of service happening digitally. You think about the House Party app, if you guys want to work in entertainment, right? TikTok is blowing up as well. Snapchat's always been there, but now I think it's becoming even more relevant. But there's plenty of companies that are still looking to pivot and hire software engineers to solve their problems asynchronously, like you mentioned earlier. But for those of you listening and have been listening for the majority of the 45 minutes here, anybody want to pipe up?
Yeah. I'll ask a question.
Right.
First of all, thanks for doing this, man. I mean, it's really, really helpful, very valuable information. What advice do you have for like recent bootcamp grads? Maybe they went to like Hack Reactor, Full Stack Academy, Codesmith, and they got the right skills, but don't have a lot of experience. Since a lot of people are getting laid off, does that mean it's going to be more competitive for people breaking into the industry? Do you recommend they focus on big companies and just focus on mastering algorithms and just getting in that way? Just if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is a good question. I think that when I'm solving for an individual case, like I'm a recent bootcamp grad, and I need a software engineering job in the next month or two, try not to get too hung up on the macro generalizations. Like, is it generally harder or more competitive? It might be true, but it might not be generally, but it might not be true for you, or at least it's not helpful to think that. So I would kind of remove that, whether it's true or not, and I would leverage the resources that are available. So one clear one that comes to mind is look at everybody that's ever graduated from that bootcamp, or beyond this. I'd look at any bootcamp that I knew of that has a grad that I can find on LinkedIn, and I'd look up all the companies that they're working at. I might even reach out to all of them and let them know that you're in this situation that they were just in 2 years ago. What would their advice be to you? I love this line of approach, which is, hey, I'd love to understand what your take is on working at this company, to a bootcamp grad or any other, say, entry-level software engineer. Many people are happy to talk about their experience, and you can learn what their experience is at that company. And then at the end of the call, there's a very specific question you should ask every time, which is, what's the best way for me to apply? And once you ask that, you'll find in many cases, that person will have just connected with you for 15 minutes on a call or whatever it is you asked for, or over email. And they'll say, either send me your info and I'll submit your application, or go to the careers page and submit an application and add me as the referrer. And if you can get what's called an employee referral by way of a 15-minute call, you will get looked at before everybody else that's applied to the careers page. This was Josh's question earlier. I like to say, let applying through the careers page of a company be your plan Z. It should be your last option because you found no others. I think in almost every case, you can find a way to get somebody at the existing company to refer you in.
Cool, thank you, super helpful.
Thanks,
one final point on that question is just, I think it can be paralyzing to try to apply to a bunch of companies and assume those hiring bootcamp grads are going to be the ones that interview you. I think it would save you a lot of pain to just do the work up front and figure out who is more likely to hire interview bootcamp grads, or who previously has. Target your search there. It'll narrow your focus and time spent so much.
You have a quick question. So when you talk to someone on the phone, you're like, hey, what's the best way for me to apply, right? Like, I've referred candidates in the past, but because I was working in a big company, not every single candidate I refer was actually looked at. So if you were talking to someone who works in a big company, like, how do you know that his or her referral for you is going to be seen?
Yeah, good question. You probably don't. I think every company has a different process. I think that the way that I would look at this is fairly statistically. I think it's just more likely that you get seen if you could get in through that way. So I'd let that always be your front running option. Most companies that I'm aware of have a process where you will be favored probably in some way, whether it's if you come in through an employee. Generally, the company's incentives are to keep their existing employees happy and then find new ones. And so it's often a pretty poor experience for you to refer your friends in and then never find out if like the recruiting team reached out. So companies are generally incentivized to like treat you as a referral better because they have current employees that are going to care. And so Yeah, you make a good point. This won't always happen. It's not guaranteed. But if you take this as your plan A and applying cold as your plan Z, I think that will already put you above 95% of the pack.
All right, John, I see your thumb. Is that you asking for some mic time? Feel free to ask your question.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you. That was some really good advice.
Cool. Does anybody else on the Zoom have a question for Troy? I mean, we have him for another 10 minutes. Let's make sure we get the most out of him before he has to go clean up his office.
I have a question. Earlier you mentioned that in the market the competition is lower and companies are actually hiring more. Could you please explain a little bit more about from data perspective, or what resources did you possibly gain that information from?
Yeah, this is anecdotal, and it's based on our own data set. So we sell software that powers the hiring process of many companies, and so we can see the activity on that software. So it's anecdotal. I don't have a big data set to support it. Even our whole customer base is a very tiny percentage of all companies hiring. So I wouldn't take this, as gospel, certainly, but it's more of a silver lining. There are certainly companies, probably the bigger ones, who have a lot of capital and are ramping up hiring. Those probably aren't the ones that are getting written about in the press. The ones that are getting written about in the press right now are the ones that are doing layoffs. So just know that there's kind of this reverse success bias going on with what you hear publicly and what's actually happening. You will find a list right now of companies freezing their hiring. You probably won't find somebody screaming from the rooftops about a company still hiring necessarily, because that's the default state. That's not new information. Though there are some good stuff out there, but good question. I'm glad we clarified that certainly is anecdotal.
Yes, thank you. The only reason I asked is because maybe it might not be worth to put a lot of resources in actually applying for a lot of job at this moment. In fact, would it be a good strategy to actually prepare for the job interviews or data structure and algorithm problems, instead of using that time and resource, which we possibly might target like after 2 months, once this pandemic is over, then we are ready, and then a lot of companies are hiring all of a sudden. That's the intent of asking this question, to actually properly utilize your time and resource.
Yeah.
You're setting us up that way. That's everything that we do at Outco, which is help folks study on data structures and algorithms, and also develop emotional intelligence so you can learn how to better connect with your recruiter. With folks like Troy, who likes to have fun on Zoom and spend his time sharing with us tips and tricks and advice for navigating the job search as a software engineer during a pandemic. Really quickly before we close out, and I mean, we have another 8 minutes of Troy's time, so I'm gonna let you all ask a question. I just want to make a quick plug. If you're interested in learning more about how Outco can help you in your job search, please put your email in the chat. Just add everyone, and we'll follow up directly and sign you up for the info session we've been listing here. What you'll learn is how we can help you negotiate a higher offer, how we break down whiteboarding and even a virtual setting, which is still happening, pair programming, walking through data structures and algorithms, sharpening your computer science fundamental skills, understanding the technical interview process, understanding the psychology of a recruiter like Troy mentioned, understanding how to build your network. Even if you don't know people at a specific company, you can get connected. It all started somewhere for all these conversations that we're kicking off. And 9 times out of 10, people don't know someone at a company, but it's the #1 way to get hired. So just put your email address right in the chat and we'll follow up with you directly if you're interested in learning more about Outco. You can also send it to Dan, the baldy right here with the headset. Dan, you want a thumbs up for us? He has the Outco shirt on. But again, I'd rather you all ask your questions to Troy directly. We got 6 more minutes. I'm going to mute again. Anybody else have a question for Troy?
Yeah, hey, this is Vijay. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, we got you, Vijay.
Yeah. I have a question. So I know that Outco is offering the 6 weeks session, 6 weeks classes on the algorithm and data structures. Later, you'll be helping in the finding a job, kind of marketing the profile and the profit sharing basis or whatever method we choose to pay, right? So if I ask you to, if I need a help just in the marketing and support in finding a job, so will you just provide that service or it's a full package? course plus marketing and finding a next job.
I'll cover this with Troy. VJ, you should sign up for our info session. We'll give you a breakdown of all of our.
Makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, we do everything full end service. It's a 4-week program, Monday through Thursday, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. We redo your resume to make sure it's aligned with what is expected in the industry, and then immediately gets you responses from the technical recruiters you're interacting with, help you connect with technical recruiters directly, break down interview processes for companies like Airbnb, Facebook, Google, by showing you the fundamentals you need to pass the interview process. Troy, you could probably speak to the fact that, right, technical interviewing is very different from having a job as a software engineer. What do you believe the reasons for that is? Why is technical interviewing so different from on-the-job experience?
It probably has something to do with the fact that most interviewers don't have a good education system for how to interview well. We're still, as an industry, trying to figure out what correlates from interview to job performance. And I think any company that thinks they have that figured out is probably sort of not on the mark. It's a very hard thing to predict on the job performance. And so a lot of people are thinking about it, though I'd say, short of going through an Outco, which I strongly recommend, you'll be with a peer group that's doing this too. That's half the battle. It helps with your psychology. You'll have people to bounce this off of. You'll be able to like run a practice. You'll get the muscles going. I would say it's not at odds with also taking some interviews. So I'd say another great way to build the muscle is to actually take interviews. Get the kind of comfortability going. Don't waiting until you're fully dialed, I think is waiting too long. I think that the more you wait, the more anxiety you'll have on that first one. But going through a program like Outco and trying to schedule one interview a week, something like that, you'll get the outreach muscles going, you'll have calls, you'll realize that this is actually like a space that you can get really comfortable in. But it's really hard to do that, I think, before you do the work to practice.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
VJ, appreciate the question. Troy, wrap it up for us. We got 3 minutes. What are your words of wisdom for us as job-seeking software engineers navigating the technical interview process in the times of a pandemic?
Let's see. Keep your heads up. Like, the market, I think, is not representative of the individual's experience. And if you look at getting a job like a job and you treat it seriously and you work backwards from the goal and you run a process, you know your goals, you know what you're trying to get out of it, and you reverse engineer that back into a 4 to 8 week process, you will literally be in the top 1%. Very, very few people are doing that. And so I think the biggest thing is you don't want to self-sabotage by believing you can't. That's the only way that will become true. You want to believe that you can. You want to run the process, budget some time, get yourself in a headspace, find a peer group to practice with, get some interviews, even if they're not with companies that you love, just as practice. Get used to the motion, get on the field, play the game a little bit, and you'll realize that you got this. Like, this is a problem that you will look back on, hopefully, and feel the anxiety was unfounded. This is a totally solvable problem. It takes work, it takes focus, it takes dedication. Most people that you're competing with don't have those things. So just get yourself in the right mindset and you're already ahead of the pack. You're going to be ahead of the pack, and just stick with it through the goal.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing, Troy. So for all of you that tuned in and stuck around this long, thank you so much. Again, Troy is the CEO of Resource.io. It's a software platform that's basically bringing us to modern day recruiting and getting more information in the hands of the job seeker and the company, and facilitating that relationship. And then Outco is a job search training program specifically designed with software engineers in mind. 4-week program, Monday through Thursday, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. What we do is break down the technical interview process and reverse engineer technical interview process, as Troy's mentioned. And what we are trying to do is share as many insights as possible to help you continue on the job search. If you have questions for Troy, you want to put your email right in the chat. And I shared his LinkedIn earlier. He's always accessible. I don't know how he does it. You can also sign up for our info session if you'd like to learn more about Outco. Here is the link to our info session. It's outco.io/info-session/sign-up. You'll learn more about the 4-week program. We want to see you succeed, and the program is designed to depend on your success. We are confident that we can help you get a job. So if you trust us, we'll pour into you as much as we possibly can. Troy, appreciate the time, the energy. Thanks for keeping it real. I appreciate you smiling in the times of a pandemic. For those of you watching and you have your camera on, if you can give me a quick smile, that'll make me happy. And hopefully you're not going quarantine crazy. You know, I mentioned this earlier, but Dan is bald. I was bald. It's our way to cope. This is not a cult. You do not have to talk to us. But we do appreciate you all tuning in, and we'll see you again soon. This is the first episode of Software Sessions, a new podcast hosted by Outco. Troy, appreciate you jumping on. Everyone,
thank you all so much. I'm adding my email. Hit me up if I can help. I'm excited for you all. See ya. Bye-bye.